des grandes nations, mais aussi des petites nations, des nations africaines en particulier. Il faut que la mondialisation tienne compte des richesses locales et de la nécessité de laisser dans les pays où les richesses sont créées un certain nombre de revenus qui préservent l'emploi et aussi le bien-être des populations. Donc oui, il y a des risques sur ce modèle du commerce libre et de la globalisation, mais nous devons en tout cas rester vigilants pour protéger ce modèle qui nous paraît être le plus important depuis la Seconde Guerre mondiale.
Now, that's fascinating, Mr. President, fascinating, because if I turn to you, Chairman, you are on the other side in a sense. You are one of the companies that has truly benefited from globalization through the supply chain and through the free movement of goods. You'd agree?
Absolutely.
Are you now one of those companies that could suffer if there is a backlash against globalization? And what would you like to see now happen?
Let me tell you, the globalization, anti-globalization feelings, there might be a reason behind it. Some of them are valid. In our case, we are trading, we are an international company. We are a global company doing a lot of trade around the world. I believe the anti-globalization sentiments are a phase. I don't think it's going to affect our business in the way that it is perceived. Today, who is holding the flag on anti-globalization is Donald Trump. For him, he's talking about fair trade, not free trade. And fair trade, everybody for it.
Isn't fair trade everybody in the eye of the beholder? The problem with the phrase fair trade is it means all things to all men and women.
Let me tell you, fair trade, to America, if America is open for every product, they expect other market to be open. If they don't open their market, they're going to have repercussions in America, which is fair.
What do you mean by fair trade, Mr. President?
Le commerce loyal, c'est un commerce juste, un commerce qui permette aux pays qui produisent de pouvoir vendre, mais également aux pays qui ont des capacités de recevoir des investissements, de les recevoir sans contraintes, disons, qui soient de nature non tarifaire. Or, il y a des règles de protection, des règles douanières, des règles non tarifaires qui peuvent découler d'une volonté politique de tel ou tel État selon les situations et les circonstances. Nous pensons qu'il faut que les accords de commerce prévalent. Il faut tenir compte, par exemple, concrètement, entre les États-Unis et l'Afrique, il y a l'AGOA, qui est un accord commercial qui permet l'admission de produits africains sur le marché américain sans taxe douanière à l'entrée. Ça doit être préservé puisque les économies ne sont pas les mêmes, nous ne sommes pas au même niveau de développement. Alors il faut qu'il y ait une protection pour les plus faibles, c'est normal, mais il faut que les règles soient des règles communes, surtout des règles convenues qui évitent l'enfermement et les surtaxes par rapport à des produits étrangers, tels qu'on le sent aujourd'hui.
With that in mind, Chairman, looking at the way in which you can grow in Africa at the moment, what is it you need from the President and his fellow presidents on the continent?
In our business, the biggest danger is the inefficiencies in supply chain. So our business traditionally start from the key word to the gate. After the gate, there are inefficiencies. What we need to have is better infrastructure to connect Dakar into Mali, into Chad, into many landlocked countries. Now in Africa, there are over 200 million people who live in landlocked countries. This is the opportunity and this is where the growth I see for my company.
And who and where, and we'll come to your public-private partnership in a moment, Mr. President, but the idea that you can find the investment capital to drive deeper into Africa comes from where, Chairman?
From private-public partnership, naturally. This is something that government cannot do on their own. This is something that the private sector cannot do on their own. So what we need from the President and many presidents in Africa is transparency, good governance, to qualify for safe investments in infrastructure.
Oh dear, Mr. President. Oh dear. He's just put his finger on one of the most difficult issues of doing business in Africa, hasn't he? Now, you have made great measures in Senegal to deal with these, but there are many other countries that haven't yet.
Bon, je vous remercie. J'ai toujours horreur de parler des autres, surtout dans le mauvais sens. Mais ce que je peux dire, c'est que l'Afrique a véritablement changé. Les Africains aussi, heureusement. Dans tous nos pays, nous essayons de faire la promotion des infrastructures. Parce que nous savons que sans infrastructure, il n'est pas possible qu'il y ait un développement, un commerce intra-africain. Sans infrastructure, il ne peut pas y avoir une croissance durable. Il l'a dit, le président, le PDG de Dubai Port World, nous avons un certain nombre de pays côtiers le long du continent africain. Et à l'intérieur, il y a beaucoup de pays enclavés, donc des landlocked countries, qui ont besoin de connexions à partir des ports côtiers vers ces pays et ces marchés. Alors donc il faut développer l'infrastructure qui coûte cher, le chemin de fer, les routes.
Who pays? Who pays?
C'est le partenariat qui paye, c'est l'investisseur qui paye et le consommateur final. Ça veut dire que c'est à la fois l'investissement public du gouvernement et l'investissement privé dans ce schéma de partenariat public-privé. Et avec un tel partenariat, l'Afrique peut développer l'investissement direct étranger et nous gagnons en tant qu'État, le privé gagne en tant que prestataire de services et c'est donc globalement que nous pourrons développer l'infrastructure et le commerce en Afrique.
I was just reading the IMF's Article 4 report, the summary into the economics of your country. It was very complimentary, which basically says you have a few challenges, but the economics are strong at the moment. Do you see it as your duty, Mr. President, to lead on this question of increasing trade in Africa, as being the president of one of the countries that's in a better situation?
Oui, tout à fait. Aujourd'hui, comme je vous l'ai dit, nous avons lancé une nouvelle stratégie d'émergence au Sénégal, qu'on appelle le plan Sénégal émergent, qui a 3 piliers sur lesquels nous reposons cette stratégie. La transformation structurelle de l'économie, c'est ce que nous venons de dire, à travers l'infrastructure, à travers l'agriculture, qui produit mieux et plus, à travers le développement du secteur de l'énergie. Bref, il faut une économie plus robuste et plus résiliente. Nous y travaillons ardemment. Le second aspect important, c'est aussi une croissance inclusive, qui préserve l'emploi, qui développe le capital humain, puisque l'avenir du monde, c'est la connaissance, c'est les métiers nouveaux, c'est la digitalisation. Donc il faut préparer les Africains dans cette économie moderne. Donc ça, c'est l'aspect 2 de notre stratégie. Et le troisième aspect, c'est l'état de droit, la bonne gouvernance, la paix et la sécurité. Donc tout va ensemble et avec 2 années d'application, nous sommes à 6,5% de croissance. En 2015, 2016 et 2017, nous tablons sur 6,8%. Donc je pense que nous sommes sur un trend positif et c'est un exemple que nous pouvons partager bien sûr avec d'autres pays amis.
Chairman, if we look at the latest numbers from the WTO, and we see a stagnation or a relevant stagnation in world trade, with a possibility of a decline in world trade. How concerned are you that that getting the engine moving again is going to be very difficult?
Let me tell you, in our business, 75% of the growth we see is in emerging markets, in Africa, in Latin America, in certain Southeast Asian countries. What we need to do is to remove the inefficiencies. Today, for me, if I see growth in the GDP in Senegal, it reflects in my business. The rule or the formula is 1% growth in the GDP in Senegal will translate to 3 times the number of containers we're going to handle. So we work with
1% GDP equals
3% more in the number of containers I can handle in that country.
Really?
And that is how we look at countries. The more growth in the GDP, the more I'm interested to be in that country.
But the problem you've got is once you're in one of those countries, it's very difficult because the capital investment is so great. We'll just pause for a moment to acknowledge His Highness. Excellent. We'll carry on for a few more minutes. Yes, carry on.
Yes. So basically, it's in my interest to see the growth in the economy of Senegal or the growth in the economy of Mozambique or other countries, because that reflects 3 times in my business.
Donald Trump, ultimately, is he a concern for you with his protectionist policies?
Not at all. I think this is a phase. I think the sentiment that you see in America, you see it in many parts of the world, but this is something you're going to pass. International trade and trading between countries is what creates jobs for people, and that will continue.
And Mr. President, the last US president had a strong Africa policy. Are you hopeful, and I use the word hopeful, not concerned, are you hopeful that this president also engages with Africa?
Oui, je pense que le président américain, quel que soit le bord d'où il vient, qu'il soit démocrate ou républicain, reste d'abord un président américain, donc pour les Américains. En tant qu'Africains, nous avons espoir que le président Trump connaîtra l'importance du continent. C'est 30 millions de kilomètres carrés, c'est plus d'1 milliard d'individus avec, disons, une classe moyenne assez importante, plus de 300 millions de consommateurs. C'est un continent avec lequel il faut traiter. Et nous avons espoir que l'intérêt que l'Afrique a suscité va se poursuivre avec le président Donald Trump. Et j'espère que très bientôt, certainement, il se tournera du côté de l'Afrique. En tout cas, l'Afrique reste un pays ouvert à la coopération avec les États-Unis, comme ça a été le cas avant. Et nous avons espoir que les choses vont se passer très bien.
It was a short discussion. I wish it could have been longer, but you have a lunch and we need to move on. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. President, thank you very much as well. I shall invite you to. Mr. President, thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Now, this time last year, when I was kind enough to be invited to be here, I said, I'll see you all next year when Donald Trump will be President of the United States. And that was exactly the reaction I got then. A sort of a general, well, he is President of the United States. And before long, a whole raft of policies, economic and otherwise, have been introduced. It is the perfect moment for us to look forward to our next conversation with the Managing Director of the IMF. Because whichever way we look at it, whether we look at it on the basis of global trade, or we look upon it on the basis of economic policies, or indeed we look upon it on the basis of what's happening in this part of the world, we need to hear the views of Christine Lagarde, the Managing Director of the IMF. Madame Lagarde, come and join us. Please. You just have a seat. Let's look at this gallery. Excellent. Okay, so let's make sure your microphone is. You organise yourself.
Yes.
Well, I find my notes. When we look at the current situation, I should use my. Oh, yeah, yeah. How concerned are you that? Let's do the economics and the globalization first. How concerned are you that there is this deep uncertainty now in the world of what happens next?
The global economic situation varies over time, varies depending on the policies of policymakers and depending on the elections decided by the voters in those countries that are governed by a democratic system. So, change is something that we reckon with, that we have to anticipate, and that we have to plan for. So, from the little we know, and I'll insist on the little we know, because this is really work in progress, and there have been a lot of announcements, a lot of tweets, a lot of things being said. But our job at the IMF is to really assess the reality of changes. But from the little we hear, we have reasons to be optimistic about economic growth in the United States, okay? It's likely that there will be a tax reform. It's likely that there will be additional investment in infrastructure. And as a result of that, it's very likely that growth will be up in the US. And we have revised our growth numbers for the United States, both in 2017 and in 2018. It was also predicated on pretty good numbers during the third and fourth quarter of 2016. So both from a looking backward perspective and looking forward based on little we know, it's very likely that the US economy will fare better. Now, that's the good news part. The more worrying news, if you will, is that it will have consequences on the rest of the world. And we are seeing it, and markets have anticipated it. And we have seen the dollar evaluate relative to other currencies, and we are likely to see more interest rate rise decided by the Fed as a result of that, because unemployment is at its lowest historical low, and inflation has begun to get close to the threshold which will trigger interest rate raise. So, currency higher, interest rate higher, that's a tightening that is going to be difficult on the global economy, and for which economies have to prepare.
So you have elegantly described a scenario that leads to volatility, and that leads, to use your phrase that you've used before, spillover effects. And there are spillover.
I avoided spillover because you don't really know what spillover is.
But we're going to see them. These waves, these economic waves, are going to lap across the shores everywhere, aren't they?
Yes, they will, but don't forget that there will be, that you have to start with the positive. Better US economy is generally good. So that's a net positive. And then you have to factor in the net potential negatives, and it's going to be dependent on the situation of each and every country. A country that is heavily indebted in US-denominated bonds or loans is going to be affected.
Are you preparing for that?
Countries have to prepare for that, and together with the authorities of the Emirates under the great hospitality of Dubai, this morning we had a meeting of all the finance ministers and governors of central banks of the Arab countries, and clearly the message that I gave them is resilience. You have to really make sure that your economies are resilient, that they are solid from a public finance point of view, that you watch your fiscal situation, that you reduce your deficits if you have them, and that you diversify both the economies and the sources of income for the state.
Having been through 2008, one would have thought that this part of the world doesn't, has seen the enormous effects if they're on the wrong side of the curve. Do you think the message has got through?
Well, when I discuss with the local authorities, they are clearly mindful of what has happened in 2008. And they're clearly mindful that having been heavy in debt, having been heavily leveraged, has caused them great harm. And it was thanks to the solidarity of some of the countries here in this part of the world that they managed through. But I think the lessons have been learned.
The other problem, of course, is the other side. I mean, we don't want to dwell too long on this, but if you're talking about building walls on the southern border of the United States, and you're talking about a protectionist policy, for example, abandoning TPP, we can put Brexit in there as well, somewhere into that mix. The world is turning protectionist, Managing Director.
The world, and when you say the world, it's also generally public opinions around the world. It's more than the countries that you've mentioned. It's the fact that people are losing confidence, that they're focused on something that policy makers, we collectively have not focused on enough, and that is those who have not had the benefit of international trade, those who have not embraced globalization and have been left to the side. And today, and more importantly tomorrow, those who will be left out as a result of technological breakthrough and the impact of a combination of artificial intelligence, robotization, and so on and so forth. And we need to prepare for that, and we need to be mindful of what we have not focused on. We've been saying globalization is great, international trade is great, and it is. If you look at the average income of people in advanced economies over the last 30 years, it has doubled. If you look at the emerging market economies over the same period of time, it has increased threefold. But we have not looked at those who were badly, negatively impacted, and that's what we need to do.
Okay. His Highness here has created an entire infrastructure around the concept of happiness in an economic sense, not in terms of, gosh, I'm feeling really good. But the two are quite related, as you're well aware. The happiness concept is very much part of the future of government. Related to that, most governments yet have to get to grips with the downside, advanced economies of globalization. And some haven't even started.
That's correct. And
yet they're still espousing, as we heard at Davos, they are still espousing globalization is good. I'm tired of hearing speeches from people still espousing globalization is good.